Your name is Tis. The Thunderstorms Saga, Episode 1, The Meeting. From the skies above, a dragon soared into the woods where shadows roared. With growls and hisses, cruel and raw, one vanished in the dragon's maw. Cinematics. Chef Kiss. The flags whipped an angry mountain wind. A cry was heard, and so the morning began on a note of anxiety and hatred. More warriors quickly appeared on the cliff. Furious threats, accusations of betrayal were hurled from all sides. Treachery! Where is the prince? Blades were drawn from their sheaths. You will pay for this with your life. Tis didn't see who struck the first blow. The sound of steel reverberated off the rocks and echoed off the camp. Death roared all around, weaving pain into anger. Protect the ambassador! A chilling scream pierced Tiss's ears. Someone's hand had been cut off. A blow sent someone tumbling into the abyss. Tiss rushed to Tinnerly, who was numb with horror. She tried to drag them away so that she wouldn't be hit by a sword. Hot, thick blood splashed onto her face. A few weeks earlier, Tiss liked being in the library. The elf had been reading about the magic since dawn. She was surrounded by dusty grimoires and fragile yellow pages. Magic. Ever since Tiss had shown a talent for the art, she had been immersing herself in learning about it. To one day be able to create fire, to manipulate pure elements with the help of natural magic, or to cast a spell and conjure an illusionary image of a book in front of her. Wouldn't that be a miracle? Not if one mastered the school of transmutation. What about summoning a creature from another world? Interesting, exciting, magical. For now, it was just a dream. Tiss had already mastered the basics necessary to gain permission to finally leave the palace and to travel to the border. Main character has access to all schools of magic, however, each of the 3 elven nations gets a small bonus to one of the schools. Forest Elf, Athletic, Dark Elf, Moon Elf. I must choose. Oh, I also notices the bonus of summoning, transmutation, and nature. Now I really hate you. Continue. Tiss put the book on the edge of the table and pulled another one towards her. It was one of the first printed publications dedicated to the life of the great transmutation sorcerer, The bindings of the tome didn't have a copper clasp, it was simpler, but the pages weren't as thick. They were made of thinner, more expensive paper. There wasn't much practical use for the book, but Tis had started reading it out of curiosity and didn't like to stop halfway through anything. Someone's notes were written in the margins next to the printed lines. Comments, magical symbols, they helped her to better understand the meaning of the main text. Tis ran her finger thoughtfully over the faded ink. You can enable hints. They make it easier. As the sun crawled to its zenith outside the window, Tis read the conclusion and closed the tome with relief. To put it diplomatically, this is a very controversial work. In the words of Master Firasener, they are the ravings of a drunken dwarf. Her audience, where the king was approaching, Tis didn't know why he had sent for her, but she really hoped it was about her request. There are plenty of time left, but she knew it would be a good idea to collect her thoughts and prepare arguments that were convincing and not too bold. The latter was often easier than the former. And I need to change my dress. The outside of her sleeve was covered in dust. It was probably gotten dirty while she was rearranging the books. Maybe I can just brush it off. She waved her arm, trying to knock the dust off the fabric. Tiss's elbow bumped into a pot of writing quills perched on the corner of the table. She leaned forward sharply in an effort to catch it. Her thigh collided painfully with the chair's armrest. One more move and... Oops. The chair fell on its side with a crash. Feathers scattered across the floor. Wonderful. She grumbled under her breath as she put the quills back in place. Then she rubbed her bruised thigh and headed for the doors. As she walked, Tis glanced at the bas-reliefs decorating the walls. During the few days she spent in the library, she never ceased to admire the work of the ancient master. It seemed as if the elven figures were about to come to life and leave the art they had occupied for more than 1,000 years. Tis especially liked one particular bas-relief. You can choose Tiss's romantic preferences. We have men only, women only, both men and women. Yes, I usually choose that and then go from there. Yes, a wonderful sculpture. She grinned at her playful thoughts. Interesting. Did he work with a life model? The royal palace had been rebuilt several times, and the garden was no exception. Here one could observe the primordial traditions of the moon elves, light stone, and compulsory presence of water. One could also see the motifs of the forest elves' culture, which they brought with them many centuries ago. A slight carelessness in the design of the flower beds as a tribute to wild nature. It was as if the plants had been here first. The statues and arbors had been placed wherever there was space. The influence of the elves who lived mostly in the dark mountains was barely felt, but that was hardly surprising. It was difficult to create anything resembling a grotto in the open air. Tis, who had spent much time here as a child, looked around. It's time to go to the chambers and change my clothes. Okay. I know it's a new book, but come on. Some options can only be purchased with diamonds. They can unlock diamond. Okay, yeah. They need to proofread before releasing. Hydrangea. I like it. Looks pretty. Grace of Frisia. Get all of them. Oh, so there's only 2 technically. It's a tough one. I do like the green. Tis had to choose powerful words to convince the king if he refused again. When she tried to leave 2 years ago, the king forbade her and ordered her to finish her studies first. She fulfilled the will of the ruler, as always. It would never have occurred to her to do otherwise. Still, her determination had only grown stronger since then. Her place was there, on the border of the hated Road Empire, at war. where her parents, whom she didn't even remember, remained forever, where her home lay in ruins. Tis didn't allow herself to be sad. She was no longer a little orphan aristocrat warmed by the great mercy of the ruler in his palace. She was a sorceress, an adult. Well, not quite an adult, not at all, one might say. But most importantly, she was ready to fight and die for her country. What would the king say today? Would he let her go? Would he offer her an honorable service as a court sorceress? As the time for audience approached, Tis grew more and more anxious. She kept touching her hair and adjusting her clothing. She shouldn't be doing that. A sorceress must have self-control. If I can't pull myself together at home, how will I cope in battle? She stopped in front of the statue and folded her fingers in a sequential combination of complex symbols. Okay. Create a stone ring. Call an ethereal assistant. Use magic arrows. I don't know what the stone ring would do. We'll do assistant. Something sparkled with pale light, as if woven with strands of fog. A snake glided across the grass. It immediately rushed at the sculpture. The snake wrapped itself around the stone and bent down, tried to sink its teeth into the sculpture's leg. The disassembled ghost of a dead viper couldn't harm a stone statue. But if its target were alive, the spell would cause a painful shock or spasm, an echo of the venomous bite that the snake possessed in life. Having fulfilled the will of the sorceress, the reptile disappeared. His frowned slightly. Her assistant wasn't too lively yet. Oh, we can... Okay, well then I'll use a stone ring. A cloud of dust rose from the ground. It thickened in an instant and turned into a kind of ring, roughly carved out of porous stone. A magic belt wrapped around the sculptor's waist. Magic of this kind did no harm. Its purpose was purely to immobilize an enemy. Tis held the shackle for several moments and then lowered her hands as if under an unbearable weight. The ring immediately fell apart, crumbling into small pieces. It hit the pedestal and turned to dust again. Tis winced. Her ring was still weak, but sometimes she was able to hold it for a little longer. Her teachers had drilled the ability to focus on magic into her. Unexpected, it pushed everything else aside. Excitement subsided. The sorceress folded her fingers into a new sign. Magic arrows. Short streaks of light emerged from her palms. They were like thin rays of sunlight cut to the length of hunting arrows. An experienced eye might even be able to discern the vague outlines of points and feathers. The arrows pierced the belly of the sculpture, scattering the golden sparks with an angry hiss. The spell was incapable of damaging stone, but a real enemy would have been injured if he couldn't dodge it. There were also no traces of magic left. The garden was unharmed and looked the same as before. Only the flowers intertwined around the statue were slightly crumpled. And perhaps Tiss's pride was a little damaged. Yes, I'm far from being an experienced battle mage. But why belittle oneself? Everyone has to start somewhere, after all. Tiss raised her chin proudly and moved along the path. After a dozen steps, she stumbled on a pebble that got caught under her heel. She began to look under her feet. I won't be sent into real battle right away. There'll be time to practice. Things have to be calm at the border for several months now. Tiss had no doubt that this was a temporary phenomenon. In 6 months or a year or 5, there would be a new battle. Small skirmishes never stopped, and no one considered them serious battles anymore. The war had gone on for centuries. Tiss watched as a pollen-covered bumblebee flew in a busy buzz to another flower. Exactly at the appointed hour, the ruler of the Ishai kingdom appeared on the garden path. The graceful, majestic gait of the approaching elf spoke more of his royal status than any royal circlet or crown. Errol Lonol Erathor's name could be loosely translated from High Elf as brave fire, child of the wise ancestors. He often preferred gazebos and garden walks to palace walls. Official meetings were held in the audience hall, and the cabinet was for working with documents. More casual conversations took place in the garden. Or, at the end of the spectrum, it was where decisions affected the fate of the country were made. Regardless, royal protocol was observed everywhere. When she saw the approaching king, Tis curtsied elegantly and bowed her head. "Your Majesty?" He responded with a light movement of his hand, inviting her to follow him. Tis was not surprised. The king was usually reserved and in no hurry to speak. Those who had lived more than 2 centuries were rarely in a hurry. Tis. Ardal walked under the roof of the gazebo and motioned for her to sit across from him. "We haven't seen each other since your arrival. Are you well?" She sat down on the bench and folded her hands in her lap. "Yes." Few people could hide anything from the king. "But I look forward to your decision about my further service, Your Majesty." "The war has not become safer in 2 years since we last spoke of it." "But I have learned a lot in that time, including patience. I won't lose my head. I understand where I'm asking to be sent. I humbly ask Your Majesty's permission. My magic is strong, and it will develop. And that's what all the teachers say." He nodded briefly. "I know. They've reported as much to me." After a rather long pause, he said, "We have a truce." This couldn't believe her ears. Every resident of Asai dreamed that the Empire would fall. Everyone knew that it was impossible. The enemy was too strong. All they could do was hold their borders, for they remained the last nation that had not sworn allegiance to the Emperor. But a truce? Just couldn't remember the last time one had been called. Has this ever happened before? Even members of the royal family were not supposed to ask the ruler questions until he allowed him. Tis wasn't a relative, so she waited, all the more quietly. "There are few and fewer of us. If our children do not lose the war, our grandchildren will. The day when there are too few of us must not come." Just pressed her lips tightly together. Ashai was founded by the ancestor of King Erdil on the ancestral lands of the Moon Elves. Thousands of years later, both Forest Elves and Dark Elves lived there, as well as children of mixed marriages. But there were only elves separated from their enemy by a mountain range. The Empire had more of everything, including land, people. It had humans, dwarves, in addition to elves. Together, its people achieved great success in magic and metalworking. As such, it was incomparably richer. The Empire also had dragons. They were huge, formidable creatures, invincible weapons that demanded submission. Ashai held the mountain passes for several centuries of war, but slowly they had begun to yield. The Emperor's envoys arrived on the new moon, brought me his proposal. A truce, then peace. The end of the war. I accepted the offer. And the ruler's confident words lay the weight of a fateful decision. The negotiation remained secret, but tomorrow the truce will be announced in the capital, then in all corners of Ashai. This was racked with confusion. She spoke carefully. "This is a great joy for everyone." "I know why you studied so hard. At the same time, I'm glad that you were too late for this war. I see you have something you want to ask me. I'm listening." "Your Majesty..." These are good questions. Why is this news a secret? "The signing of a peace treaty can be disrupted." She clasped her hands in astonishment. "But why? Who would need something like that?" "Some imperial houses sent their troops to our borders for years and lost dragons. They bet on the war,
They hoped that in the future the Emperor would divide the conquered lands among them. The news of peace will not please everyone.
The king's eyes swept across the garden. When he looked at Tiss again, his gaze was piercingly stern.
Unfortunately, there are also many in Ashai who want to continue the war. I do not need provocation. Our fate depends on it. And my daughter's life. Fanuel will marry the Emperor's son, Prince Tai. As a dowry, the Empire asks only for silver mines of the Green Mountains and a fifth of my personal ships. The peace treaty will be signed immediately after the wedding. In time, I will pass the crown not to my youngest son, but to grandson. This has happened before, and it will happen this time again. My daughter will give birth to him, and she will sit at the right hand of the Emperor. Both thrones will be united by one hair, one blood.
Tiss spoke carefully. This is a very difficult proposal. The king did not answer. It seemed that only the two rulers knew the whole truth. Tiss understood that the frankness of Erdal had shown in their conversation was completely beyond her status. And it was only a reminder of the fact that the king favored her exceptionally. Maybe he wanted her to do something. The king reached for a flower from the plant that intertwined the gazebo. He tore off a dried petal.
So what does this have to do with you? 2 ladies in waiting will go with Fanuel to the Empire. The first is Lady Tenderly. The second was supposed to be Lady Nasil, but she's very ill. Given the importance of this event, I've decided not to send her on the journey. You will take her place.
Ignoring her stunned expression, he continued,
You are of noble birth, you are well educated. And most importantly, I do not doubt your loyalty, Tiss.
Your Majesty. The ruler spoke authoritatively, suppressing any desire in her to argue or request a change in his decision.
You can handle it.
It wasn't her place to remind the king that the Imperials had killed her parents. Ashai was full of those who had lost their sons, their husbands. Erdal himself had lost his older brother. And only those who did not know the king at all could believe he had rejoiced at the path to the throne that opened up for him. He was a younger prince, but he had lost a close relative. And now Erdal, who had lost his brother in the war, had to give his daughter to the enemy. This is the price of peace. She bowed. Yes, Your Majesty.
This palace will always be your home. If you wish, you may return here. But first you will help Fanuel settle into the Empire and become one of their own.
Aristocratic houses own everything, but an aristocrat does not belong to their own self. Sooner or later they must pay for the rich clothes, honors, expensive meals to their house, country, and king. They must also pay for the mercy of the ruler. Tiss had every reason to be happy. There was a long-awaited peace. She had received a very important assignment from the king. This was exceptionally good news, but she didn't feel happy. I'm just afraid of change. This is actually a great opportunity to serve Ashai. She smiled softly. This is a great honor, Your Majesty. Indeed it was. Despite all the blood spilled over the hundreds of years, dozens of aristocrats would have liked to be in Tiss's place.
Wonderful. I am sending an embassy with you to the Empire. It will be led by Lord Anloth A. Quantargo. Lady Valora El Amanilia has been appointed as his advisor. Several aides will go with them.
Anloth had served the king for half of his life, sometimes acting as his direct representative. He is held in high esteem by all. Valora represented one of the most influential houses of Ashai. She was the queen's younger sister and the princess's aunt. She was an infrequent guest at the palace. spending most of her time in the native lands. She was also known as an excellent archer. Tis knew both Lady Emilia and Lord Quantargo, only in passing. She knew Lady Tennerly a little better. They even played hide and seek together as children. She'll make a wonderful lady-in-waiting. The king looked at Tis appraisingly. She did not shrink from his scrutiny.
I like what you have become.
Thank you. He's done so much for me, I wouldn't let him down. I won't let a shy down.
Tis, is there anything else you need to clarify? Please, there is no room for shyness.
Is there anything else I should know? Any details about the groom or the empire?
Tis, their etiquettes, history, and main houses are known to you. If you want to know the latest news, speak to Fanuel or her aunt.
Oh, we can ask all these then. When do we leave?
At dawn.
So soon.
The servants will help you pack your things. Tell them everything that you want to take with you.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
There's no need to thank me. I know this is not at all what you were preparing for, Tis. But there are no other suitable candidates. The other girls are either too young or live too far away to make it in time. Or they are just not smart enough.
Ardell stood up and Tis immediately followed suit. Her audience was over. Oh, we only got to ask 2 of 4 questions. Okay. She bowed. Your Majesty. The king looked sadly at her. Ardell's brother had died defending the castle ground and the pass on the border. At the same time, Tiss's father had died fighting side by side with the prince. Her mother was also in the castle. Aristocratic women sometimes visited or accompanied their warrior husbands near the front. When the wounded soldiers were replaced by reinforcements, they returned to the capital. They brought Tiss with them. She was only a few months old. The former king had a hard time coping with the death of his oldest son and soon left this world. The eldest prince had no heirs, so Erdal took the throne. And he took the orphan from the border into his court. He personally supervised her upbringing and education. He did so to honor the memory of all who had fallen in battle, and life went on.
I will see you off in the morning.
Ardal had given Tiss everything. Wealth, wonderful teachers, a carefree childhood. In all of her years here, she never once felt like an unwanted guest. The palace had truly become her home. God's help me to be worthy of his trust. Once again, alone in the gazebo, she collected her thoughts for some time. Peace. The peace treaty will be signed with the Empire. I will go there for a few years, maybe a few decades. I will smile, bow, show respect. But Ashai survived. My parents gave their lives for this. I can do this, I can handle this. I won't let him boss our princess around. Preparations for the journey had to be postponed. The servants told Tiss that the princess wanted to see her in her royal chambers. Fanuel was in the company of the other lady-in-waiting. The sorceress bowed. Your Highness, Lady Tennerly. Lady Tiss Vidri. Hello. How did you take the news? I was surprised by the king's decision. Court life is familiar to me, however, receptions and balls aren't my strong suit. Well, Lady Tinnerly is surprised as well. Fanuel turned to the window. I hope you get along. Rest assured that we will, Your Highness. Of course. I have asked my aunt to come. Let's wait. Tennerly asked immediately, Shall I order tea to be served? She's great at this. I need to get used to these, my responsibilities. Should I suggest some reading material to the princess? I know a very interesting work on dissection and use of insects and the art of magic. Have them serve some wine. Oh, Fanuel isn't thinking of getting drunk out of grief. It's not like her, but in circumstances like this, who knows? No, she won't do that with her aunt around. Tenderly gave the order to the servants as soon as the wine was brought in. Lady Velora appeared. "Hello, Fanuel. Young ladies." The ladies in waiting greeted her in return. Velora moved in slightly unusual manner. She was calculated, but also incredibly graceful. She exuded restraint, strictness. It is the status of an ambassador's advisor that compels you to behave this way. Or is it a personality trait? Young ladies, you're not much older than I am. Tenderly, Tis, this is my burden. If either of you have doubts that you can handle it, speak now. I'll ask my father to keep you at home. Will my aunt help persuade him? He looked at Velora questioningly. Of course. I want you to be absolutely sure that you're ready to go to the Empire. You can count on me for everything, Your Highness. I will only repeat what I told the king, Your Highness. It is a great honor to be your lady-in-waiting. In that case, thank you in advance for the support I will undoubtedly feel from you until my wedding and beyond it. I suppose you must prepare for the journey. Don't forget warm clothes. You'll need them. The ladies-in-waiting bowed and walked to the door. Velora stayed with her niece. As they left the wing of the princess's chamber, Tenderly smiled politely at Tis. It is so unexpected that you will be accompanying us. No one was more surprised than I. The sorceress decided to ignore the backhanded phrase, accompanying us, as if she wasn't truly a part of their group. Have you only recently returned to the palace, correct? You went away to study magic? Yes, She interrupted her politely. How interesting. Be sure to tell me more about it later, okay? Her next smile was even more polite. I must now check on the servants who are laying out the dresses. See you in the morning. Case looked at the sun. Yes, it's time for me to go get ready too. The library was usually a quiet place. In the evening, the magical hall of the palace library was dead silent. As Tis expected, not even the caretaker was there. She had two things to do, and as long as witnesses didn't interfere with her first task, choosing a book, then her second task, replenishing magic, would benefit from the comfort of solitude. Let's start with the book. Tis had no doubt that the king would allow her to take an entire chest full of tomes, but she decided against emptying the shelves before leaving. After all, the developed empire should have its own library. I'll definitely take something valuable from there. But for now, I'll take this and read it during the journey. From the shelf she pulled out the work of a famous wizard. It was written in High Elvish. Alright, so we have Summoning Basics, Great Transmutations, and Essence of Nature. I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, if I choose differently, because remember, we're by our race, I guess, is transmutation, summoning, or nature. Does that go against who we are, or what? I'm so confused. I guess I'll play it safe. Let me know. But otherwise, here we go. Now for the most important thing. She looked closely at the floor. Casting spells wasn't just a matter of having an innate gift, learning spells and forming signs correctly. Every practicing mage used their acclimated magical powers. As Master Ferensener used to say, it was like running. Even if you were the most resilient runner and could run for a whole day, at some point you would have to stop to drink water. Tis approached a shelf in the dimness of a room. She took several bottles and a bag with necessary ingredients. Among mages, there were commonly referred to as components. Ground light fish bones, fresh chicken blood. She opened the stopper and took a sniff. Not very fresh, but it'll do. She also needed dried hemlock and several other strange-looking substances. All of these things were sold in magic shops or obtained independently. Some cost less than a basket of apples, could be found in a typical kitchen. Others were only paid for in gold and precious stones. This shook her hands. Perfect lines were required. She drew 3 even outer circles on the floor with chalk. The inner circles were drawn with chicken blood. It contained a triangle and the symbols of the magical schools. There was no need to determine the cardinal direction. Someone had carefully marked the sunrise with a perfect precision on the far wall. Tis drew the final lines on the floor and meticulously examined the resulting pentacle. It's precise. She didn't want to waste the components. She tilted her head and peered closely at the symmetry. Everything is precise. She stepped inside. The fingers of her left hand formed the vessel sign. For some reason, this particular sign always turned out worse when done with her right hand. The sorceress immediately felt a tingling sensation in her palm. She dropped to her knees. The symbols lit up. It was barely noticeable at first, but after a minute they were so bright that their reflections began to play on her face. Magic began to flow into her body. Now it was important not to lose concentration. As usual, Tis had lost track of time. Experience told her that the ritual would take about an hour. She straightened her dress and stepped out of the faded ring. She winced as the circulation returned to her numb legs. Her head was slightly dizzy. Her body was aroused with excitement. Magic is intimate. Magic is a powerful rush. It's intoxicating. Once you feel it, no matter how painful and difficult it may be later, you will never refuse it. It was completely dark outside the window. Tis stretched, relaxed, and languid. The influx of magical energy always caused a surge of love and desire within her. She tossed her hair, grinned. No one knew her like this, only magic and the pentacles. Tis slowly came to her senses and sobered up. Disturbing thoughts about the upcoming journey returned to her. In a few hours, she would be sailing on a snow-white ship, and she would climb the mountains. And I'll cross the border and see the Imperials, face to face. Tis wiped away the blood that had gotten in her eyes. It wasn't hers. An Imperial fell at her feet. The sorceress jumped over the body, grabbed the lady-in-waiting by the hand. She slipped and scrambled on the now red stones as she dragged her away from the battlefield. A new scream, a new death, the frantic flashings of weapons. And suddenly there was a loud, commanding voice behind her. White light. God help me. 1 day earlier. Servants and warriors pitched tents, built fires, busied themselves with pack saddles. A grasshopper chirped in the fragrant mountain grass. The sun emanated a pleasant warmth. Tis had finished reading the book she had borrowed from the library a long time ago. She had nothing else to do, so she walked around the camp and looked at the scenery. There was no sign of the enemy. Former enemy, I have to get used to saying that. Only the ruins of the castle reminded them of the war. Tis had studied history, but even she didn't know the structure belonged to the Empire or a Shai. It could have been the castle had passed from hand to hand until so destroyed that there was no point in fighting for it. Formally, this was the land of the Empire. In reality, it was no one's land. Barely perceptible breeze touched her cheek, bringing with it the sweet scent of flowers. Is that lavender? She turned her head in all directions, searching for the purple blooms. An angry voice came from off to the side. And for how long? This turned around to Fanuel's indignant voice. They're keeping me waiting. Me, The Princess of Ashai, how dare they? Ty must meet us personally. Lord Anleth was with her. He took Fanuel by the elbow and spoke to her softly. He was clearly trying to calm the princess down. The king's ambassador and close confidant is a man of experience and wisdom. It'd be useful to hear how such a high-ranking persons are reassured. Useful to hear. Ladies in waiting will have to do that more than once. Who would know how to manipulate those who rule, if not diplomats? It's a useful skill. Tis moved closer.
When your fiancé arrives, we will certainly bring this to his attention. But allow me to do that. I believe that an acquaintance that begins on a harsh note will not have the best effect on further communication. Who knows, perhaps the prince will try to make up for this oversight.
You are right, Lord Anleth. I am overly emotional.
After a long journey, it is only natural, your highness. It is a very picturesque gorge. Would you like to take a look at it?
Anleth led her through the tents to the far end of the camp. Tis was so absorbed in the conversation that she did not hear someone approaching her. The princess is agitated. Not surprising. Not at all. Laura began to make polite small talk. How are you? Much better. Are the Imperials really late? No. We arrived early. It is much more difficult for us to estimate travel time accurately, so we traveled with a time reserve. I believe they will fly in exactly at the appointed time. Tis repeated the phrase silently with just her lips. They will fly? Something must have changed in her face, Laura asked. Are you afraid of them, lady? No. Tis looked in Valora's eyes and added, for as long as I can remember, I've dreamed of killing them. There was a pause, and then Lady Emilia laughed. The king made a wonderful choice in appointing you as a lady-in-waiting. They should appear before the sun touches that peak. Tis watched the retreating backs of the ambassador Anleth and Fanuel. Lady Valora, I will order for water to be heated for the princess. May I be curious? Of course. What do you know about the prince? Te-A and I is a warrior. He commanded the suppression of the rebellion in the east of the empire. He fought against us too. He led the troops in the Grey Valley. We won that battle. Many do not think so. And you? Neither do I. It wasn't profitable for the Emperors to hold the valley. Ty's task was to give the rear detachments time to take everything of value and flood the copper mine. They achieved their goal. He didn't sit out in the rear in the other battles. He's brave and a good strategist. What else? They say he is experienced in matters of love and generous in his attentions to women, but only to ladies of high birth. He shuns commoners. Tell me about the Imperial House. They say it's cursed. Tis raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? The Emperor had 2 wives. The first bore 3 sons. The younger one is Fanuel's fiancé. During the 3rd birth, the Empress died. A few years later, the eldest of the children died. Then the middle one. The Emperor married again. His 2nd wife gave birth to 2 daughters. Then died 3 years later. What were the causes of death? Various natural causes and accidents. For example, the eldest son drank too much wine in his inexperience. He was drunk, fell down the stairs. The stairs in their palace are probably no shorter than ours. He broke his neck. A tragic and stupid mistake by the servants. They simply failed to look after the imperial son. But rumors of a curse spread among the courtiers. And even if the nobles and other residents of the palace try not to touch the subject, lest they incur the Emperor's wrath, it is impossible to keep all the citizens quiet. Superstitions, and ironically, they consider themselves more advanced. Any curse can be easily recognized, even by an inexperienced mage. That's the first steps. The members of the Imperial House were probably examined by the best sorcerers. You were right. If he had the slightest doubt, His Majesty Erdol wouldn't have agreed to marry his daughter to the Emperor's son. You should mention your opinion to Fanuel from time to time. She is romantic and impressionable. These rumors bother her. Laura changed the subject. Did you choose the outfit yourself? Yes. You have amazing taste. Why, thank you. Thank you. You look wonderful, too. Very confident and... Laura gave Tiss a slightly sly and interesting glance. Why is the thing at the top of the page popped up? Thank you. Impressive. The ambassador's advisor clearly liked the compliment. Tenerally approached them. Am I interrupting? Yes, but go on. Of course not, Lady Tenderly. We were discussing how the lady-in-waiting could help my niece. Were we? Tiss raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. We were all ready to do whatever is needed for Her Highness and in her stead, if need be. The arrogant smile suddenly appeared on Flora's face. Her tone was biting as she spoke. What are you implying in Her Highness's stead? Fanuel must be carrying a child for the enemy. Will you lie in his bed for her? Tenderly lowered her eyes. Tiss clarified in the same tone. Would that help? The ambassador's advisor looked thoughtfully at the sky. Who knows? Who knows? Tiss followed her gaze, but noticed nothing. They are flying. Despite her determination, it felt frightening. The huge creatures that were born to bring death were getting closer and closer. Until now, Tiss had only seen them in engravings and paintings. No matter how skilled the artists were, they couldn't convey all the sensations. Power, force, predatory, unmistakable majesty that defied all reasons. First, Tiss looked at their long membrane wings. They caught the wind, subjugating it to their will. Then the outlines of their heads appeared. Next, ever elongated saddles at the base of their necks. Each of the monsters carried several riders. As they chose a place to land, the dragons circled the air above the camp. In the setting sun, their huge black shadows glided across the tents. The warriors froze in suspense. Tiss's throat went dry. Oh, we get a cinematic. I go with that one. Should I keep my hair like this? Yeah, just go ahead. I liked what we had, but I'll pick it again some other time. The Imperials were preparing for the princess's rite of passage from one country to another. The golden sun shone as the prince personally supervised the preparations. The dragon on which the prince had arrived sat behind the tents, closer than the others. The rider rummaged through the bag strapped to his saddle. I heard that the matriarchy has been preserved in their dark elf houses. Generally seemed to be looking at the riders as well. We're closer to each other, so our cultures have blended. And in the Empire, it's every man for himself. That's why the separate traditions of all the people have been preserved. There are fewer things that unite them. How unusual. Tis remembered the name of the flying rider. Lord Shea Arnes. Dark elf men aren't always modest or ambitious. Sometimes they make good warriors and strong politicians. But for a dark elf to become a dragon rider, this is the first time I've heard of such a thing. Ru'ad preserves different cultures, but the throne is still inherited through the male line. Only because the Emperor's house is a clan of forest elves. Tenderly twirled a lock of hair around her finger. And a man from the matriarchy, this is interesting. Oh, Lady Tenderly, there's never a boring moment with you. If it weren't for his dragon. Yes, what a fearsome creature. But we are the ladies in waiting for the future Empress. We'll have to get used to it. Approach. And the sooner we get used to them, the better. Are you with me? What? Gods, do you want to go there to him? Yes, it'd be useful to get to know Lord Shea Arnez better. Surely there's a good reason that he was the one carrying the prince. No, I won't approach that creature. I'll wait for you here. Dis laughed. Oh, creature. What an undiplomatic way to refer to Ganache. I didn't. Without giving the lady in waiting a chance to explain herself, Tis walked to the edge of the camp. She had to make an enormous effort to get closer to the dragon. At first, he seemed to be asleep, but when she was only a few steps away, he opened his eyes. I want to pet you. No, the monster was not born to bring death. It was the embodiment of it. Tis froze. She forgot how to breathe. Hundreds of years of war, hundreds of thousands of dead. Blood on huge fangs, crushed bodies under clawed feet. The rider stroked the huge snout without turning to face her. You good dragon, yes. The dragon closed his eyes again. Tis blinked and the vision dissolved into the fog and wind. How can I help you? He fastened the buckle on his bag and turned around. Lady Tis e Vedri? Yes, Lord Shea Arnez, so Ganache. The elf looked at her without interest. He spoke coldly. Are you going to come closer? Tis forced herself to take us 2 more steps. So how can I help you? Lord Ganache, I wanted to ask... You must be the best, since you carry the prince. The saddle is comfortable. Is that modesty or an unwillingness to engage in conversation? You're the lady in waiting, of course. Our prince's future bride. Showing courtesy and respect is mandatory. That's why I answered you. That's the truth. He's not very talkative. Sha'anez pointed behind Tis. Unless she's having a conniption, Lady Tinnerly seems to be calling for you. I suppose that means everything is ready for the ceremony. Discouraged by Shea Arnez's candor, Tis turned to see tenderly waving her hand. Tis waved back. Lord Sha'anez, will you not be attending? Don't worry, I will not. Neither will the other dragon riders. I will stay here, make sure that none of your servants or warriors get too close to the dragon. Only then did the rider smile. We wouldn't want to spoil the joy of their highnesses' meeting by someone getting their head bitten off, would we? Tis wasn't sure if that was a sarcasm or a sincere attempt to lighten the conversation with a joke. Actually, I wasn't worried. About heads being bitten off? Great approach. Tis realized that she had fallen into a similar verbal trap to the one Tennerly had recently gotten herself into. She decided to walk away silently, holding her head high. Before it gets worse. Basically, she was outwitted. What a surprise. Tis knew that some ceremonies of the imperial houses were closely related to the rites of the forest elves. The race came from a time when the empire didn't exist. But she had never seen anything like this. 4 people helped tie a anai, 2 men and 2 women. Fanuel, Lo, Erlel. daughter of Erdol, my forest accepts you. The princess glanced excitedly at the elves from 2 different countries standing around her. The wind of its branches will strengthen your spirit. A man slowly walked around the princess with a smoking incense burner in his hand. He carefully handed the incense burner to Tis and retreated. Tis happened to be the closest of all the Ashai at the moment. The fragrant smoke of smoldering herbs tickled her nostrils. Tis is holding a golden burner. Take it. Tis accepted it with a bow, her hands trembling slightly under the weight of the gold. In some cases, sprite fall back. Listen, Romance Club, your code is leaking. Time you have to make a choice is limited. Try to hold the burner. Tis gripped the vessel tighter, hoped that she would have enough strength to last until the end of the ceremony. Meanwhile, the prince continued. You will not stumble on its ground. One of the elves held a flat bowl with a pile of earth brought specially from the imperial capital. The woman threw a handful at Fanuel's feet, slightly staining the hem of her dress with dust. Then she handed the dish to Ambassador Anleth. Its fire will warm you. An elf stood to the front of the princess with a deep bowl in his hands. Flames danced above the bowl. Fanuel held her palms over the fire. The flame licked her skin. The bowl was then given to the second lady in waiting. She tenderly held it. She pressed her lips tightly together, but didn't even think about letting it go. Its water will wash you and give you strength. Another elf stepped forward, not a forest elf, but a moon elf, of which there were quite a few in the Empire. She held a silver bowl filled with water. Fanuel took a long sip from it. Lady Valora then accepted the cup. My forest will give you food. The prince took a wooden bowl from his aids and stepped towards the princess. There were nuts in the bowl. A thought flashed through Tiss's mind. She's accepting food from the enemy. Even if it isn't a wedding, it's the beginning of peace. The princess ate a kernel of the most common hazelnut. Why only a common one, though? Maybe it's from a sacred grove? Fanuel Leno Erleth, daughter of Erdol, my forest has accepted you. And I accept the forest. It's a pretty dress. The heir to the throne looked around at all the elves of Road. Welcome, my bride. They fell to their knees at once. Ambassador Ainleth followed suit. Then the rest of Ashai knelt with him. In the evening, the smell of cooked food wafted over the camp. Despite the ceremony, the Ashai and the Imperials kept their distance. They looked around cautiously and did not try to get to know each other better. Too many years of war and too much grief. But Tis followed the princess's orders, went specifically to the former enemies. Te and I stood by the fire with a melancholy air. He threw small twigs into the flames. Several people sat relaxed in the chairs nearby. Among them were the consul and the woman who had served water at the ceremony. There were also 2 riders, including a dark elf Shah Arnez. Your Highness? Lady Vetri? The princess asked me to convey a message to you. She is grateful for the offer, but asked for your forgiveness. She will not be able to join you for dinner. Uh-oh. Why? It took us a long time to get here, and Her Highness is tired. Of course. Tis didn't repeat the princess's exact words. I'll have enough time to get sick and tired of eating in his presence. Well, that's a shame. However, if that is the case, take her dinner to her tent. I'm sure she'll like the dish. It is specially prepared for the princess. Take it to her. Wow, it's a diamond choice for I'm a lady and a maid, or I'm a lady in waiting, not a maid. I don't carry food. I order it to be served. Not a very obedient lady in waiting. I obey my princess. Tay and I was clearly not used to that. He raised an eyebrow, the rider that Tis did not know. chuckled. Are shy ladies in waiting usually this insolent? The prince made a short gesture with his hand. Drop it. The rider immediately stopped short and bent over in a bow. It's not insolence, it's devotion, which is commendable. As a servant of my house, I hope you would respond in a similar manner in a similar situation. Please forgive me, Your Highness. There was approval in the prince's eyes as he looked at Tis. Not from me. Ask for her forgiveness. Please forgive me, lady. Stop wasting time, find a servant, tell her to bring the dinner to my bride. And get me some good wine. Yes, Your Highness. Lady Vetri, I wish the princess a pleasant stay and good dreams. I'll be sure to tell her. The prince and his assistant lost interest in her. Only Lord Charnez looked at her wryly. Tis liked the Imperials less by the minute. Tis couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned until her sides ached. Eventually she rose from her camp bed and left the tent quietly, trying not to wake tenderly. The sky was overcast and the stars were almost completely hidden. The mountains surrounding the camp were drowned in darkness and completely covered the horizon. Everything looked differently at night. It took Tis a minute to figure out where everything was. The edge of the plateau, the path, and most importantly, the dragons. She had not even the slightest desire to approach the scaly monsters. Earlier that afternoon, Tis had noticed a mountain cranberry bush at the edge of the camp. It had been too awkward to pick and eat the berries in front of everyone. But now, no one would interfere. She walked around the supply tent and picked several ripe, sweet, and sour berries. She pulled another twig towards her, intending to pick another berry, and froze. There was someone behind the tent. I didn't imagine it. There may not be a second one. This listened. She recognized Fanuel's voice immediately and even understood part of what was being said. The person the princess was talking to spoke much more quietly, only rustling or breathing indicating their presence. I'll think of something. If we do everything now, we can leave in the darkness. We know these mountains better. No way to lie under the enemy, to forget about the war. Their house is cursed. Are they talking about the Imperial house? Then the unknown person spoke for a long time. The princess seemed to reply with something, but Tis didn't hear exactly what it was. Then she heard... Exactly. My brother is gentle. I won't allow the country to be ruled by his future wife, who will play him as she pleases. We must continue the war. Tis shuddered. The princess was talking about going against the king's will. This is treason. From the inside, how do you envision it? No, better now. Right away. I can approach the prince. The emperor isn't young, and he has no other sons. Is she crazy? The twig Tis was holding slipped from her grasp, leaving only the torn leaves in their fingers. In the silence, the twig struck the other branches very loudly. At the same moment, the whispers behind the tent stopped. Tis didn't have to be smart sorcerer to understand that she had been heard too much. She knew nothing of political intrigue, but she was confident that no one lived long after hearing even half of what she had. Besides, it didn't matter at all how it would end for the princess and her conversation partner. Tis hurried away, trying to move as quietly as possible. A thought flashed through her head. Where? What should I do? Sleep? As long as I don't wake up tenderly, I never left the tent. From behind came the voice of the princess. Who's there? Hello? No one's there. There's a mouse. Bye. At dawn, a scream woke the camp. Alert! Elves leaped from their tents. They looked around, feverishly wondering what's going on. They kept their hands on their weapons. What happened? I don't know yet.
The princess is missing. What? She's not in the tent, Lord.
She ran away.
This is an insult. You broke our agreement.
The tension grew relentlessly. The shy warriors and the Imperials teetered on the brink of battle, glaring at each other with undisguised suspicion. Prince Tai appeared, forcing his rentoir to disperse. He quickly approached the ambassador. Everyone calmed down. When was the last time you saw her? Speak!
Before midnight. Damn. Shah Arnaz. I'm here, Prince.
2 dragons in the sky.
Yes, Your Highness.
The rest of you, search everywhere. Leave no stone unturned. Inspect every nook and cranny. His warriors rushed to carry out the order. The Ashai elves waited. Lord Ainlos command. He locked eyes with the prince and shouted,
You heard him. Everyone search for the princess. Where is Her Highness maid? Bring her to me.
Huge wings flapped, raising clouds of dust. 2 swift shadows soared into the sky. Lanterns, torches were lit, dispersing the morning twilight. The warriors, ladies in waiting, and servants scattered in different directions. 3 horsemen galloped along the road back to the guard castle of Ashai, and 3 rode in the depths of the Empire. Go to the gorge, go to the sharp rocks, go to the scree of the slope. I'm gonna go to the gorge. The plateau where the camp was set up ended in a cliff at the one end. The picturesque gorge that skirted the mountain from the north stretched far and formed a pass, but it was also impossible to get down from the plateau. Tis and several other elves looked down in fear at the bottom of the gorge. Lady Valora was nearby. Carefully, as so not to slip off the edge, she leaned over the abyss. Damn, Tis. Yes? Forgetting protocol, the aristocrat spoke without turning around. Hold on to me. Tis grabbed her hand and planted her feet on the stones. Laura leaned further out. There's nothing here. Let's move on. Then they saw her close by. Here! This way! Tis could not scream. Her throat went dry in an instant. Silent, motionless, she stared at the bottom of the gorge. Oh no. She's dead? Well, shit. New warriors appeared at the cliff. Calls for death, clash of steel, blood on her face, Tenderly's hand, slippery stones, an authoritative voice from behind, a loud, harsh command from the prince who he didn't yell, but everyone still froze. Stop. Split into 2 groups. Behind him, a dragon sat on the stones. Uh-oh. The guttural roar left no doubt that anyone who disobeyed Tai, and I would die. Lord Charanez's gaze was no kinder than his monsters. Swords in sheaths. The Imperials listened. The Ashai warriors ready to die only clenched their fingers tighter around their hilts. Lord Anloth, must I remind you of whose land you are on? Lady Valora. Ambassador and his advisor exchanged glances. Put away your weapons. Several soldiers immediately rushed to bandage the wounded. Those who remained moved closer to their lords.
We are on your land, and the princess was killed on your land, Prince.
If you are right, and the princess was killed...
What? Are you implying that this was an accident?
What are you insinuating?
This is a provocation.
Tai and I winced. Stop it.
How is that?
The princess's voice rumbled. Lord Anleth, was a firm warning in the tone of the Emperor's hair. Never interrupt me. The Lord remained silent. If the princess was killed, then raising the issue of trust is nothing short of stupidity. Any direct statement would question the weight of my word or yours. It is an insult and a source of conflict. The peace of our rulers have been agreed upon is under threat. What are your orders, Prince? It was perfectly clear to all that the Ashai had no chance of winning the battle. There, out in the open, one winged monster could end them all. The gorge is too narrow for a dragon. We will lower ourselves down on ropes and retrieve your niece's body. Lady Valora Amenlia, will you accept our aid with this? The elf didn't answer immediately, but her voice sounded confident. Yes, Your Highness. Next, your ambassador and consul will jointly question those who might have seen something. And one last thing. Everyone is expected to go to Road. Lady Amenli, I hope you and the ladies in waiting have warm clothes. It's cold in the sky.
Excuse me, Your Highness. What made you think we would agree to this?
I'm sorry, Lord, but I'm not asking. We're in the Empire and things will be as I say.
Are you taking us prisoner?
I'm inviting you to visit. No one refuses me. Lord Ainlith, if everyone goes home now, the war will continue. You were traveling to Road on a diplomatic mission, so continue it. The princess was lifted from the bottom of the gorge, tenderly fainted from the sight. Hair matted with dry blood, legs broken, twisted, and unnatural ankles, a dress torn by the stone. Valora looked at her niece's body with an expressionless face. Tears ran down her cheeks. Then there was long, fruitless conversations, attempts to figure out what had happened. Before midnight, the princess told the guards to leave her alone. The soldiers were surprised, but of course they obeyed. Then dawn came, and they discovered Fanuel wasn't in her tent. No one had seen Tess go out to pick berries, so she did not mention what she had overheard that night. First of all, who would believe her? Second, if she told the wrong person, she'd be the next one they'd put out on the gorge. Besides, if the prince found out about Fanuel's plans, the peace treaty would be in jeopardy. Tess returned to her tent and shook her head. Everything is falling apart. How can we talk about peace now? It's war again. We've been captured. The ambassador is right. She was jolted from her reverie by Tennerly, who was stomping around the tent in confusion. What happens now? I have no idea. It's one of them, and now they're all going to kill us. Lady Tiss, why didn't you cast a spell when the battle began? Lady Tennerly, I saved you. A choice had to be made, retreat with you or fight. Do you think I did the wrong thing? She clasped her hands together. No, sorry. I didn't thank you. I mean, Tiss interrupted her. No matter. I have never seen elves die before. She honestly admitted. I guess I was afraid to. And now I'm too scared. Or still scared. But I don't know what's scarier. What does that mean? The sorceress looked around the camp. The Ashai, Lord Ainlith, Lady Valora, the servants, the warriors, the Imperials, the prince, the flying riders, the consul, the elves who performed the ceremony, more warriors. Nothing. It's nothing, Lady Tennerly. Sorry, I'm just so upset that I don't know what I'm saying. We were told to get dressed. Two outfits in one episode. Anyway, practical, floral, cozy and warm. Neat. Get all of them. Just go with floral. Tess flew with her eyes closed. Special straps held her in the saddle behind the rider. Occasionally she dared to open her eyes, but when she did, she saw the other dragons flying nearby, to the left and a little to the right. The prince was riding one of them. The others carried the ambassador, the consul, Valora, and Tennerly. By the order of Te and I, most of the retinue stayed behind to await the arrival of Road's warriors. They would then proceed to the capital. Tis took no pleasure in being among the special guests, or perhaps prisoners. It'd be better to ride with everyone on the horseback, or in a cart, or even on foot, through the whole empire. Anything would be better than this. After some time, Tis thought she was getting used to it. Was it her imagination, or had the dragon started to fly more slowly? She looked around. Ahead of her was a second dragon, barely visible in the gloom of the clouds. Another was to the right, and also far away were those shadows in the clouds. Did the winged monsters get carried in different directions by the wind, or is my rider lagging behind for some reason? When he swayed in the saddle, Tess became agitated again with renewed vigor. She reached a state of near panic. Then the dragon began to descend rapidly. The dragon landed in a small valley, lowered its neck, and the flying rider wheezed. Get off. Grabbed the straps and dismounted on his own, almost falling out of the saddle. This is bad. This is all very bad. Not knowing how to do it right, Tis slid off the dragon and onto her rear. What's wrong with you? The elf sat down on a flat stone and rubbed his throat. I don't know. Lady, there is a bottle of black glass in the bags. Tis had no choice but to overcome the horror of being so close to the monster. She unbuckled the belt and looked inside the saddlebag. Don't eat me, I'm not tasty. She immediately found what she was looking for, a small bottle, enough for a couple of sips. Here. When they were deciding who would fly with whom, they never told her his name. The flying rider drank it and lay down. The dragon watched his rider and hissed with concern. The elf contorted, turned on his side, coughed, and then he vomited green mucus. What? Water. Tis reached for the bags again. Nope. Is your water poisoned? I don't know. Maybe. He couldn't finish and started coughing again. Tis took the leather flask. She poured the water on the ground and looked around. Are there any lakes or springs here? Streams? I don't know this place. Don't you dare die. She ran towards the bushes. Her logic was simple. Maybe they grew there because there was water. She was lucky. There was indeed a thin stream running over the stones. Tis filled the flask halfway, then shook it to rinse out any remaining poison. Then she filled it again, this time to the brim. Who poisoned him? Or maybe it's not poison. What then? The bush rustled from the side. Tis immediately turned around and dropped the flask. With no time to get up, she staggered back. Cunning, vile creature rushed towards her as if flowing over the stones. Tis had seen the species in engravings and read about it in books. A scry. The hell are your ugly ass doing? Ugh. Scientists who had studied such creatures would classify this one as a medium size. They would probably also say that Tis was too large to be its prey. But apparently there wasn't as much food in the mountains as there was on the researcher's table, so the creature had no choice. It rushed to attack, snapping its mandibles like scissors. There was nowhere to run or hide. The sorceress crawled away. She held out her hand and folded her fingers in a sign. We'll go with transmutation. One magical arrow flew past it and landed in the stream, but the second one hit it in the head. Strong chitin above its eye survived, but the creature clearly didn't like it. It curled up into a ring, convulsing and squealing hideously. Before the scry could launch another attack, Tis jumped to her feet. She wanted to repeat the spell, but the creature was already too close. There was no time to think. Tis, desperate to fight back, simply kicked the scree in the mandibles with all of her might. It flew back into the bushes, from which it had crawled. Apparently realizing the battle was not going in its favor, it decided to retreat. A moment later, the ringing, chitinous body disappeared behind the stones. Phew. How was I supposed to survive the war? This isn't time to berate myself. I need to act. After all, I fought back and managed. I just wish my teeth weren't chattering. She paused for a moment to make sure the oversized centipede had moved on to easier prey. She then picked up the flask, stumbled, and nearly fell. She rushed back to the rider. In any other situation, Tiss would not care about the life of an Imperial. She would let him die. How many of them already rotted in these mountains, pierced by arrows, hacked to death by glorious shy swords? One more, one less. Who should she pity? Yesterday's enemy? But then how would she get home alone? There could be scries that are much larger and therefore much more dangerous. Therefore, besides, they were far from the only creatures who would be gladly diversify their boring diet of birds and mountain goats with a young, juicy elf. The dragon understood, or sensed, that his rider was in trouble. He bared his teeth and didn't take his eyes off Tiss. Trying not to pay attention to him, Tiss leaned over the elf. "Are you alive? Hey!" Yeah, but his eyes wheezed. "This is bad. Help me take off my jacket." He seemed pointedly to ask why. Yet he could barely speak. Tiss untied the lacing and undid the small hook and loop clasps. The rider's clothing hugged his body tightly and was supposed to protect him from the wind at high altitude. She had to tinker with it for a while. Freed from his jacket, the elf stood and removed his undershirt. "What do we do?" The rider didn't answer. He glanced at the dragon and grabbed Tiss by the neck. He took Tiss by surprise, knocked her down. He collapsed on top of her and squeezed his fingers more tightly. Tiss twitched, just like the scry had done not long ago. She kicked and tried to push the rider away. Even though he was poisoned, he was much stronger. She gasped. She reached for a stone, threw it at the elf. It didn't hit his head, only his shoulder. He growled, clenched his fingers tighter. Cloudy circles swam before her eyes. She hit him for a few more times, or maybe she just tried to. The pain in her throat was blinding. The back of her head ached. Tiss weakened quickly, barely able to resist. A pulsating black and red veil covered the elf's features. As he leaned over Tiss, she saw that his face was distorted with rage. If you'd like to give the development team of this story a gift, large or small, to show your appreciation, listen, I'll do a video. Hold on. Also, unfortunately, there are no advertisements available from our sponsors right now. Sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, I was able to get the ad to go through. Anyway, how would you rate this episode? Long as hell! Holy shit, how was it? 5-star cinematics, there was a lot of them. I love the moving animations in the back. 5 stars, solid. Chapter was really, really good, or episode, whatever you want to call it, right? I call them chapters, because, Ooh, actually, technically 4 stars, though, for the error messages, but we'll get to that here in a minute. 3 to Raven, 1 to Nature, 1 to Summoning, 3 to Transmutation. Look, we got diamonds, fam. Holy shit. Listen. Congratulations, there's no chapter 2. If each one of these episodes, I'm calling them chapters anyway. If each one of these is that long, oh my god, I wasn't prepared for this. I was not prepared at all. So, first and foremost, if you did enjoy the video, please, for the love of all that is holy, and also my sanity, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Please, if you're not already, subscribe, please subscribe. There's also the join and thanks feature. Listen, okay, you could go to a movie theater and you would pay like $10 just to sit, okay? I just did a movie. Serious? Bro, it was almost an hour and a half long. I'm serious. Jesus, that is the longest, congratulations, that is the longest chapter I have ever read in my entire existence. Again, there was a lot of cinematics, there was a lot of things going on, so, I let it happen, but holy sweet baby Jesus, and so I've already done, numerous other chapters today for choices, so I'm I'm mentally, exhausted, right? How you, cram for college and shit, right? And you read a bunch. Listen, I've been at this shit for 7 hours now, okay? My brain's, I haven't done this shit in a long time, okay? Again, college days, okay? My brain is, Okay? Normally on Fridays, I do like 1 to 3 chapters and then I call it. I'm just done. I tap out. Man. So again, please consider sharing at the content. Please consider supporting. I don't know what to tell you. So aside from that, really well done. Really well done. I am exhausted though. So I'm gonna go ahead and just tap out now. If you want some feedback, I'll be glad to reply to you in the comments, right? But aside from that, my mind is just okay. It's done. Hopefully you reached this far in the video. Let me know if you did. Aside from that, yeah, man, I'll cover some other Romance Club chapters some other day. But after choices today, and then this lengthy ass movie that we just did, I'm done. I need a nap. Oh boy, peace out.